Captain Kim Taman rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the flickering control panel. Mining Station 7 had been having power problems for 3 days now, and nothing made sense. The energy readings were all wrong, like someone had been tampering with the core systems. "Sora, can you take a look at this?" called to Engineer Lee Sora, who was crawling under the main console with her toolkit. "What am I looking for, Captain?" she asked, her voice muffled by the machinery. "The power logs. Something's not right about them." Sora pulled herself out and wiped grease from her hands. She had been working on Federation stations for 8 years, ever since she graduated from the Engineering Academy. She knew these systems, inside and out. "Let me run a deep scan," she said, connecting her portable scanner to the main computer. The device hummed quietly as it searched through layers of data. After a few minutes, something strange appeared on her screen. "Captain, you need to see this." Taman leaned over her shoulder as she pointed to a series of files that seemed to be hidden in the system's memory banks. The files were encrypted, but they were old, much older than the station itself. "Can you decrypt them?" he asked. "I can try, but it might take some time." Sora's fingers flew across her keyboard as she ran decryption programs. "These aren't standard Federation codes. They're using something much more complex." Hours passed as they worked together. Taman brought coffee and food while Sora continued her work. The mining station was quiet around them, with most of the crew sleeping. Finally, at 3 in the morning, the first file opened. "What is this?" Taman whispered as images filled the screen. The pictures showed a beautiful planet covered in blue oceans and green continents. White clouds swirled around the globe, and the surface looked rich and alive. But according to every history book they had ever read, this couldn't be real. "The metadata says this is Earth," Sora said quietly. "But look at the date stamp." Taman felt his stomach drop. The date was from just 5 years ago, 45 years after. Earth was supposedly destroyed by pollution and climate disasters. "This has to be a mistake," he said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Sora opened another file. This one contained documents that mentioned Earth Prime and Population Transfer Protocol 7. The language was clinical and cold, talking about humans like they were cargo being moved from one place to another. "Captain, look at this section," Sora said, pointing to a paragraph that made both of them go cold. The document described Earth as a preserved ecosystem that was being maintained for recreational purposes. It talked about the successful relocation of human breeding stock and mentioned genetic modification programs that were supposed to make humans more suitable for various work assignments. "This can't be real," Taman said. But even as he spoke, pieces of his life started falling into place. The mandatory health checks that all humans received, the way their work assignments always seemed to match their genetic profiles perfectly. The fact that humans never seemed to get promoted to the highest levels of Federation command, so Dashraw found more files. Hundreds of them. Each one contained more evidence that everything they had been told about their history was a lie. Earth wasn't destroyed. Humans weren't rescued. They were taken. "We need to tell someone," Sora whispered. But who could they trust? And more importantly, how many people were part of this deception? Dr. Park Jinwoo couldn't sleep. Data that Captain Kim had shared with him 3 days ago kept running through his mind. As the colony's head xenobiologist, he had studied alien DNA for 15 years. But he had never looked this closely at human genetics before. Now he wished he hadn't. "The patterns are too perfect," he muttered to himself as he stared at his computer screen. The lab was empty except for him. It was well past midnight, but he couldn't stop working. Human DNA showed clear signs of artificial modification. Not recent changes, but alterations that went back generations. Someone had been carefully breeding humans for specific traits: intelligence, physical endurance, adaptability, and something else that made his blood run cold: compliance. The next morning, he called Security Chief Naeum Haijin to his office. She arrived looking tired, carrying a cup of coffee and a stack of reports. "You look like you haven't slept either," Jinwoo said. "I've been checking the colony records like you asked," Haijin replied, sitting down heavily. "What I found doesn't make sense." She spread her reports across his desk. Every human colony I contacted has the exact same population structure. The same ratio of men to women, the same age distributions, the same job assignments based on genetic profiles. Jinwoo nodded grimly. And the marriage compatibility services? That's the worst part. Jin's voice was barely a whisper. They're not matching people based on love or compatibility, or creating breeding pairs based on genetic markers. Look at this. She showed him a chart that made his stomach turn. Every human marriage in the past 50 years had been designed to produce specific genetic outcomes. Couples who applied for children had to undergo genetic counseling that was actually selective breeding management. It gets worse, Hyjin continued. I found communication logs between colony administrators. They're not human. Ginwoo felt the room spin around him. What do you mean? The real administrators are members of something called the Harvest Council. The humans we think are in charge are just middle management. They give orders to the human supervisors, who then implement policies without knowing what they're really doing. Ginwoo pulled up his genetic analysis and showed it to Hyjin. Look at this modification pattern. It's designed to make humans more obedient to authority figures. But there's something else. We're also modified to be incredibly adaptable and resourceful. Why would they want that? Hyjin asked. Because we're not just slaves, Jinwoo said quietly. We're premium slaves. They've been breeding us to be the perfect workforce, smart enough to solve complex problems, strong enough to do dangerous work, and compliant enough to follow orders without question. Hyjin stared at the data. How many humans are there? Across all the colonies, according to Federation records, about 200 million spread across 47 worlds. That's not colonization, Hyjin said. That's a farm. Jinwoo opened another file. I found references to other species too. The Zeltari, the Makari, the Veltaran, they're all mentioned in these genetic management documents. We're not the only ones? You mean there are other enslaved species? I think the entire Galactic Federation is a lie. Every species we've been told are our allies and partners. They're probably prisoners just like us. Hyjin stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the colony where 30,000 humans live their carefully managed lives, the work schedules, the housing assignments, the food distribution, it's all designed to keep us controlled. Isolated, Ginwoo added. Notice how humans rarely interact with other species. We're kept separate so we can't compare notes or realize what's happening. What about the Federation Council meetings? Hyjin asked. I think those are just for show, to make us believe we have representation. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of their discovery settling over them. We need to contact the other colonies, Hyjin finally said. But we have to be careful. If the real administrators find out what we know, they'll move us to a different facility. Jin was finished. Or worse. How many people can we trust with this information? Ginwoo thought carefully. We start small. Find humans who've noticed things don't add up. Build a network slowly. And then we figure out how to break a system that's been controlling us for 50 years. Commander Osunjo thought he was going crazy. For weeks he'd been having strange dreams about a place that didn't exist. A world with vast oceans and towering cities made of glass and steel. The dreams felt more real than his waking life. He was walking through the medical bay trying to clear his head when Medic Choi Mina grabbed his arm. Commander, I need to speak with you privately, she whispered, glancing around nervously. Min-Ah led him to a storage room deep in the medical wing. She sealed the door and activated a small device that filled the room with white noise. Those dreams you've been having, she said quietly. They're not dreams, they're memories. Sung-ho stared at her. What are you talking about? The monthly vitamin injections everyone receives. They're not vitamins, they're memory suppressants. But sometimes they don't work perfectly, especially on people with strong mental resistance. Minna pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. And this is what we're really being given. It's designed to keep us from remembering our true past. That's impossible, Sung-ho said, but his voice lacked conviction. 3 months ago, I stopped taking the injections. I've been giving myself fake ones instead. My memories started coming. Back slowly, pieces at first, then larger chunks. She sat down heavily on a supply crate. I remembered my grandmother. She used to tell me stories about the old world, about cars that flew through the sky and buildings that touched the clouds. I thought they were just fairy tales. Stung Ho felt his knees go weak. The dreams I've been having are real memories. Breaking through the chemical suppression. But Commander, there's something else. We're not alone in this. Ina led him through a maze of maintenance tunnels beneath the colony. They walked for almost an hour before reaching a hidden chamber that Sung Ho never knew existed. Inside, about 20 people sat in a circle. Most were human, but 3 were clearly from other species. A tall, thin creature with silver skin and a being covered in what looked like blue fur. "Welcome to the Resistance," said an elderly human woman. "I'm Dr. Yoon Haewon. I've been waiting to meet you, Commander." "How long have you known?" Sung Ho asked. "Some of us have known for 30 years. Others discovered the truth more recently. We've been very careful about who we approach." Dr. Yoon explained that the Resistance had been growing slowly, identifying humans who showed signs of breaking through the memory suppression. They had also made contact with members of other enslaved species. "The killery here is named Valinas," she said, pointing to the silver-skinned being. "His people have been enslaved for over 200 years. The Makran Tolwyn has been helping us understand the broader network." Valona spoke in a melodic voice that somehow came through as perfectly understandable. "Your species is new to the harvest. You still retain much of your original fighting spirit." "Fighting spirit?" Sunjo asked. "Every species the harvesters take goes through the same process," Tolwyn explained. "First, they're convinced they're being rescued. Then they're slowly modified and controlled. Most species give up after a few generations. But humans are different," Dr. Yoon said. "Even with the memory suppression, some of you keep breaking through. The harvesters are having trouble with your species because you're too stubborn to stay controlled." Mina showed Sung Ho a collection of hidden documents. "We've been gathering evidence for decades. Real history, technical specifications for the suppression drugs, communication intercepts from the harvesters." "How many colonies know the truth?" Sung Ho asked. "We have contacts in 15 colonies now. Small groups like ours, all working to wake up more people." Dr. Yoon leaned forward. "But we need military leadership. Most of us are doctors, engineers, teachers. We need someone who understands strategy and tactics." The harvesters made a mistake. "When they modified humans," Valina said, "they enhanced your natural abilities without realizing how dangerous that would make you once you discovered the truth." "What do you mean?" Sung Ho asked. "Your species evolved as hunters and warriors. The genetic modifications were supposed to make you more compliant. But they also made you stronger, smarter, and more adaptable. In trying to make better slaves, they accidentally created better soldiers." Tolwyn nodded. "My people were never warriors. When we discovered the truth, we could only hide. But humans, ... humans might actually be able to fight back." "Fight back against what?" Sung Ho asked. Dr. Yoon smiled grimly. "Against the largest slave empire in galactic history. The harvesters have been doing this for millions of years. Enslaved thousands of species across hundreds of worlds. Now," Mina said, "it's time for their slaves to wake up." Communications Officer Han Yujin's hands shook as he stared at the access codes Commander O had given him. The Resistance had been planning this moment for months, but now that it was here, the weight of what they were about to do felt overwhelming. "Are you sure about this?" asked historian Bae Yoonji, who sat beside him in the hidden communications center they'd built in an abandoned mining tunnel. "No," Yoonjin admitted. "But we can't keep living this lie." For the past 3 weeks, Yoonji had been working around the clock to piece together the fragments of real human history that the Resistance had collected. What she'd discovered was both heartbreaking and infuriating. "Once we send this broadcast, there's no going back," she said softly. "Every human in the galaxy will know the truth." Eugene nodded and began typing. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced skill as he accessed the Federation's main communication network. The Resistance had spent years mapping the system's weaknesses, and tonight they would exploit every single one. Broadcasting in 3, 2. The signal went out simultaneously to all 47 human colonies, in homes, workplaces, and public spaces. Every screen suddenly displayed the same message: the truth about Earth's emergency broadcast from the human resistance. On Colony 15, a family eating dinner stopped mid-bite as their wall screen flickered. To life? On Mining Station 3, workers dropped their tools and gathered around monitors. In the new Seoul Administrative Center, officials frantically tried to cut the transmission. But Eugen's signal was bouncing through too many relay stations. EUNGE's voice came through clearly as she began reading from the recovered documents. Citizens of the human colonies, what you are about to hear will shock you. Our entire history has been a lie. She explained how Earth had never been destroyed by climate change or pollution. Instead, it had been preserved as a private paradise. For the alien species that had enslaved humanity 50 years ago, satellite images taken just last month show Earth's oceans still blue, its forests still green, Yoonji continued. While we've been told we're colonists building a new life, we've actually been slaves, separated from our true home. The broadcast showed genetic evidence of deliberate human modification, documentation of breeding programs disguised as marriage services, and proof that the Galactic Federation was actually a slave management system. Eugen watched the colony's communication channels explode with activity. Messages were flying between confused and angry humans across the galaxy. The beings we call our Federation allies are actually our captors. Yunji's voice continued. They've been studying us, modifying us, and using us as an advanced workforce for decades. On Colony 23, factory workers walked out mid-shift. On Agricultural Station 8, farmers abandoned their fields and gathered in the town square. The uprising was spontaneous but coordinated. 50 years of suppressed human instincts were finally breaking free. Look at this, Eugen said, pointing to his monitor. Colony 12 has seized their administrative center. Colony 31 is blocking all outgoing ships. The most shocking revelation came when Yoonji displayed images of Earth's current state. The planet was beautiful, with sprawling cities and pristine wilderness areas, but the inhabitants weren't human. They were the elite members of the Harvester species, using humanity's birth world as their personal vacation resort. They hunt in our old forests, Yanji said, her voice breaking with emotion. They swim in our oceans. They live in cities built on the ruins of our civilization while telling us our home was destroyed. Eugen received an urgent message from Commander O. Federation security forces are mobilizing. They're trying to suppress the uprisings. It was too late. The truth had spread too far and too fast. Humans across the galaxy were refusing to report to work, demanding answers from their administrators, and in some cases, taking control of their colonies entirely. The memory suppression drugs they've been giving us are wearing off, Yoonji announced. Many of you will start remembering fragments of the real world in the coming days. Don't let them convince you these are hallucinations. On Colony 7, a group of engineers had barricaded themselves in the power station. On Research Station 5, scientists were downloading and copying every file they could access before security arrived. We are not colonists, Yoonji concluded. Are not refugees. You're prisoners, and it's time to break free. As the broadcast ended, Eugen sat back in his chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Across the galaxy, 200 million humans were waking up to the truth. The real war was just beginning. Colonel Yu Dong-hyeon watched the Harvester suppression ships descend toward Colony 19 and felt something he'd never experienced before. A cold, calculating rage that seemed to sharpen every sense in his body. They're making a mistake, he said quietly to tactical analyst Shin Ya-young, who was monitoring enemy movements from their hidden command post. What do you mean, Colonel? Ya-young asked, her fingers dancing across multiple screens showing. Harvester troop deployments. Look at their formation. They're treating this like every other slave uprising they've dealt with. But we're not like the other species. Dong-hyeon had been analyzing the situation for 3 days since the truth broadcast. The harvesters had deployed their standard suppression protocol, overwhelming force designed to break resistance quickly. It had worked on dozens of other enslaved species over the centuries, but humans were different. The genetic modifications. They gave us, Donghain continued. They were supposed to make us obedient, but look what they actually did. He pulled up a tactical analysis that Ya-Young had prepared. Our reaction times are 40% faster than baseline human genetics. Our problem-solving abilities are enhanced. Our physical endurance is increased. They tried to make us better slaves, but they accidentally made us better soldiers. Ya-Young nodded, pointing to her combat simulations. There's something else. The peacekeeping training they gave us wasn't really peacekeeping at all. For 20 years, human colonies had participated in what they thought were Federation peacekeeping exercises. They'd learned urban warfare, resource management under pressure, and how to coordinate with limited communication. They'd practiced fighting in difficult terrain and adapting to unexpected situations. It was all preparation, Ya-Young realized. They were training us to suppress uprisings on other worlds. But now we're using those same skills against them, Donghain said with a grim smile. The first Harvester assault team landed, expecting to face panicked civilians. Instead, they found coordinated resistance cells that had been unconsciously preparing for this moment their entire lives. Colony 12 is reporting something interesting, Ya-Young said, reading an incoming message. The Harvester troops are confused by human tactics. They keep trying to target our command structure, but we're not fighting like they expect, because we don't have a traditional command structure, Donghain explained. Humans form emotional bonds that other species don't. We fight for each other, not just for orders. On Colony 15, a maintenance worker named Kim Cheol-soo had never considered himself a fighter. But when Harvester troops threatened the school where his daughter learned, he found himself leading a group of 20 neighbors in a perfectly coordinated ambush. The Harvesters don't understand family bonds, Ya-Young observed, watching the tactical reports. They see it as a weakness, but it's actually making us stronger. Donghain watched as human resistance cells across the galaxy began adapting faster than the Harvesters could respond. In the mining colonies, workers were using industrial equipment as weapons. In the agricultural settlements, farmers were turning their knowledge of terrain into tactical advantages. Look at this pattern, he said, highlighting several colonies on the strategic map. They're not just fighting independently, they're instinctively coordinating with each other. The emotional connections again, more than that. Humans are pack. Hunters, we evolved to work together, to adapt our strategies based on what our allies are doing. The Harvesters have been fighting species that think individually, but we think collectively. A message came in from Colony 7. Harvester ground forces retreating. They couldn't handle our coordinated counterattacks. Sir Yang said, her voice filled with amazement. I'm seeing reports from 14 different colonies. The Harvesters are having trouble with all of them. Donghain studied the data. Every human colony was fighting differently, but they were all winning. The farmers used different tactics than the miners, who used different strategies than the factory workers. But somehow, they were all effective. It's the adaptability, he said. They modified us to be flexible problem solvers. They wanted us to handle different types of work, but that same flexibility makes us unpredictable fighters. It is. Have been using the same suppression tactics for thousands of years, Ya-Young added. They're not prepared for an enemy that changes strategies every few hours. And there's something else, Donghain said, reading a communication from the underground network. The other enslaved species are starting to join us. When they see humans fighting back successfully, they're finding their own courage. You think we can actually win this? Donghain looked at the tactical display showing human victories across 17 colonies. I think the Harvesters just realized they made the biggest mistake in their species' history. They tried to create the perfect slaves, but they accidentally created the perfect rebels. Admiral Lee Kun-soo stood in the command center of what used to be Federation Station Alpha, the headquarters of the Human Rebellion. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a loyal Federation officer. Now, he was leading the largest coordinated uprising in galactic history. Status report. He called to Intelligence Officer Kim Nari, who was managing communications across 47 human colonies. 31 colonies are now under full human control, Nari reported. The remaining 16 are in active combat, but our forces are advancing. Kang-Su studied the holographic display showing the entire galaxy. Red dots marked harvester strongholds, while blue dots showed liberated worlds. The blue was spreading faster than anyone had imagined possible. The harvesters' automated defense systems are failing, Nari continued. Their computers were programmed to handle isolated uprisings, maybe 1 or 2 worlds at a time, but we're hitting them everywhere simultaneously. And the other species? Kang-Su asked. Nari's eyes lit up with excitement. That's the best news. The Killary Rebellion started yesterday. 18 worlds are in open revolt. The Makran are launching coordinated strikes on mining facilities. Even the Veltaran, who've been enslaved for over 1,000 years, are fighting back. 3 months ago, none of these species had been in contact with each other. The Harvesters had kept every enslaved race isolated, preventing them from sharing information or coordinating resistance. But humans had changed that. The communication network is working perfectly, Nari said. Each species is sharing their tactical advantages with the others. Kang-Su watched as real-time updates flowed across his screens. The Killary were natural pilots, and they'd seized control of several transport fleets. The Makran were incredible miners and engineers. They'd been sabotaging harvester infrastructure from the inside. The Veltaran had developed advanced stealth technology during their centuries of hidden resistance. The harvesters don't know how to fight this, Nari observed. They're used to dealing with one species at a time, using the same tactics that worked before. But now they're facing 4 different species, each with completely different fighting styles. A priority message came through from Colony 23. Admiral, you need to see this, Nari said. The message showed footage from a harvester command ship. The alien officers were in obvious panic, their usual calm demeanor completely gone. They kept trying to deploy suppression fleets, but every time they focused on one species, the others would launch surprise attacks. They're making the same mistake they always have, Kang-Su said. They think like individuals, but we're teaching the entire galaxy to think like a team. Sir, incoming message from the Killary Fleet Commander, Nari announced. The holographic display showed a tall, silver-skinned figure. Admiral Lee, I am Fleet Commander Zelenas. My people are ready to coordinate our next phase of operations. Do you propose? Kang-Su asked. The Makran have identified the location of the primary harvester shipyard. If we can destroy it, we can prevent them from building reinforcements. That's halfway across the galaxy, Kang-Su said. How do we coordinate an attack at that distance? The Veltaran have been studying harvester technology for centuries, Zelenas explained. They've developed a way to disrupt their communication networks. If we can cut off their ability to coordinate, we can hit multiple targets simultaneously. Nari was already pulling up tactical data. Sir, if we coordinate this properly, we could hit over 100 harvester facilities at once. They won't be able to respond to all of them. And there's something else, Zelenas continued. The humans have shown us something we never understood before, the power of hope. For the first time in centuries, enslaved species across the galaxy believe they can actually win. Kang-Su felt a chill run down his spine. How many species are we talking about? Intelligence suggests the harvesters control over 200 enslaved species, Nari said quietly. If even half of them join the rebellion, ... We're not just fighting for human freedom anymore, Kang-Su realized. We're fighting for the freedom of the entire galaxy. The harvesters have been the dominant power for millions of years. Zelenas said they've never faced a coordinated multi-species alliance. Their automated systems, their tactics, their entire military doctrine, it's all designed for fighting isolated uprisings. But we're not isolated anymore, Kang-Su said. No, Zelenas agreed. Thanks to human ingenuity, we're all connected now. And together, we're stronger than the sum of our parts. Nari looked up from her communications console. Admiral, I'm receiving similar messages from 12 other species. They're all ready to coordinate the next phase. Then let's give this harvesters something they've never seen before, Kang-Su said. A galaxy united against tyranny. Strike team leader Park Woo-jin crouched behind a crystalline formation, watching the massive structures of the harvester homeworld stretch into Wu. the alien sky. After 3 months of careful planning, his team had finally reached the heart of the enemy's empire. "This place gives me the creeps," whispered Xenarchaeologist Song Mi-kyung, adjusting her scanner to avoid detection. "It's like a graveyard." But for entire civilizations, the homeworld was unlike anything they'd expected. Instead of a bustling metropolis, they found a world that felt ancient and cold. Towering spires reached toward the sky, but they were built from materials that seemed to shift and change color as the team watched. "How old do you think this place is?" Woojin asked. Mi-kyung checked her readings. The geological scans suggest these structures are at least 50,000 years old. Some of the deeper foundations might be even older. They'd been on the surface for 6 hours, carefully making their way toward what appeared to be the central complex. The harvesters had impressive technology, but their security systems were designed to keep large armies out, not small infiltration teams. "Look at this," Mi-kyung said, kneeling beside what appeared to be a monument. "These symbols are not harvester writing." Woojin examined the carved stone. Symbols were beautiful and complex, but they had a sad quality that made him feel uncomfortable. "What language is it?" "I don't know, but I'm seeing similar symbols on other structures. It's like they're displaying trophies from conquered worlds." As they moved deeper into the complex, the pattern became clearer. The harvesters had built their civilization on the remains of others. Every building, every artwork, every piece of technology seemed to be stolen from a different species. "Woojin, you need to see this," Mi-kyung called from ahead. She was standing before a massive wall covered in what looked like viewing screens. But as they got closer, they realized these weren't screens. They were windows into vast storage. "Chambers, what are we looking at?" Woojin asked. Archives, Mi-kyung whispered. "But not just data archives. Look." Through the transparent walls, they could see shelves stretching into the distance, filled with objects from countless worlds. Art, books, sculptures, technological devices, millions of items carefully preserved and cataloged. They're not just taking people, Mi-kyung realized, they're stealing entire cultures. Woojin activated his recording device. "This is incredible and horrible." Young was running her scanner over the archive windows. The energy signatures suggest these chambers extend for kilometers underground. This isn't just a collection, it's a museum of extinct civilizations. "Oh. Many species do you think are represented here? Thousands? Maybe tens of thousands?" Mi-kyung's voice was filled with awe and horror. "Every species they've enslaved, every civilization they've destroyed, it's all here." They found a way into one of the archive chambers. The air inside was perfectly preserved, and the silence was overwhelming. Row after row of shelves contained the final remnants of worlds that no longer existed. "Look at this section," Mi-kyung said, pointing to an area filled with crystalline storage devices. "The technology is similar to what the Kilari use, but much more advanced. This might be from their homeworld before they were enslaved." Woojin picked up a small object that looked like a child's toy. These were people's lives. Families, children, entire histories all reduced to museum pieces. The harvesters don't just want slaves, Mi-kyung realized. They want to own everything. Every achievement, every work of art, every scientific discovery. They're not just conquering species, they're consuming them completely. They found evidence of civilizations that had achieved incredible technological advancement before being enslaved. Species that had developed faster than light travel, others that had mastered genetic engineering, and some that had created art so beautiful it made them both want to cry. All of this knowledge could have been shared, Mi-kyung said. These species could have worked together, learned from each other. Instead, the harvesters hoarded it all. In the deepest part of the archive, they discovered something that made them both stop in their tracks. A section dedicated to Earth, filled with human artifacts that had been taken before the mass kidnapping 50 years ago. "These are from the real Earth," Woojin said, looking at photographs of cities and landscapes he'd never seen but somehow recognized. "Our history, our culture, they stole it before they took us. And now they're using our planet as their personal playground," Mi-kyung added angrily. As they prepared to leave, Mi-kyung made one final discovery. Hidden in a corner of the archive was a small device that contained something remarkable: the complete historical records of every enslaved species. "This is it," she said. "The proof we need. Not just that they're slavers, but that they're murderers of civilizations. With this data, we can show every enslaved species what they've lost. Can you copy it? Already done?" But Wujin, there's something else. According to these records, the harvesters aren't just ancient, they're dying. Their species is getting weaker with each generation. That's why they need slaves. They're parasites, Wujin said. They can't create anything themselves anymore, so they steal from others, which means they're more vulnerable than we thought. Dr. Lim Jae-seok stared at the massive data file that Strike Team Leader Park had brought back from the Harvester homeworld. The information was overwhelming. Complete histories of over 3,000 enslaved species dating back millions of years. "This is bigger than we imagined," he said to cyber warfare specialist Ko Yansu, who was analyzing the Harvester communication networks. "They haven't just enslaved these species, they've erased their memories of who they used to be." Hyansu looked up from her screens, her eyes red from days of continuous work. The psychological conditioning runs deep. Some of these species have been slaves for so long, they don't even remember they were ever free. "But what if we could remind them?" Jae-seok asked. "What if we could show them their real history, their real achievements, all at once?" The idea was ambitious beyond anything they'd attempted before. Instead of just broadcasting to human colonies, they would send the truth to every enslaved species in the galaxy simultaneously. "The technical challenges are enormous," Hyansu said. "We need to access the Harvester's main communication network, break through their security, and transmit to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. And we'd need to do it all before they can stop us," Jae-seok added. For the next 2 weeks, they worked with specialists from dozens of different species. The Keelery contributed their advanced piloting skills to help navigate the complex network pathways. The Makran provided their engineering expertise to build the transmission equipment. The Veltarans shared their stealth technology to help the signal avoid detection. "It's like building a virus," Yansu explained to the assembled team. "Instead of destroying data, we're inserting truth. The signal will carry the real history of each species directly to their communication networks." "Will it work?" asked Zelenas, the Kalari fleet commander. "It should," Jae-seok said. "The Harvesters use the same basic communication protocols across all their controlled worlds. If we can inject our signal into their main hub, it will spread automatically to every connected system." The plan required perfect timing while the cyber team launched their truth broadcast. Military forces from all the allied species would simultaneously attack key Harvester installations. The goal was to create so much chaos that the Harvesters couldn't respond to the psychological warfare. "Remember," Jae-seok told his team, "we're not just sharing information. We're giving billions of beings back their identities, their cultures, their reasons to fight." The night before the operation, Yansu made a final adjustment to the transmission. "Code, I've added something extra," she said. "Real-time translation protocols. Every species will receive the message in their own language, even species whose languages we don't know." "How is that possible?" "The Harvester's own systems. They've been translating between species for millions of years. We're just turning their own technology against them." The operation began at midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Yansu's fingers flew across her keyboard as she navigated through layers of Harvester security. The virus she'd created was designed to look like routine maintenance data, allowing it to spread through the network without triggering alarms. "Signal is propagating," she reported. "Reaching the outer systems now?" Across the galaxy, billions of beings suddenly found themselves remembering things they'd forgotten. Tolvani remembered their beautiful crystal cities. The Mercari recalled their ancient songs. The Zeftalon species discovered they had once been master craftsmen whose art had been admired across 100 worlds. "It's working," Jae-seok said, watching the network traffic surge as the truth spread. "Look at the response patterns. World after world, enslaved species were waking up to their real histories. But more than that, they were realizing they weren't alone. The broadcast showed them that thousands of other species had suffered the same fate, and that many were already fighting back. The Harvesters are trying to shut down the network," Yansu reported, but it's too late. The signal has already reached critical mass. What does that mean? It means the truth is spreading faster than they can stop it. Every system that receives the broadcast automatically forwards it to connected systems. It's become self-sustaining. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating to the harvester control system. Species that had been passive for centuries suddenly remembered their warrior traditions. Beings who had accepted their slavery as natural began to question everything they'd been told. Reports coming in from all sectors, J.C. Oak said. Spontaneous uprisings on over 400 worlds. The harvester's automated suppression systems are completely overwhelmed. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Instead of trying to coordinate military action across thousands of worlds, they had simply given every enslaved species the same thing humans had received, the truth about their past and the knowledge that they weren't alone in their fight for freedom. Sir Yansu said, "The Harvester Command Network is going into emergency shutdown. They're trying to cut communications entirely." Too late, J.C. Oak smiled. The truth doesn't need their network anymore. It's spreading on its own, from person to person, world to world. The galaxy is waking up, Yansu said in amazement. All of it, all at once. President Telect Kung Daewon stood in the ruins of the Harvester Council chamber, surrounded by the debris of an empire that had lasted millions of years. The final battle had ended 3 days ago, but the silence still felt unreal. "Sir, we need to talk about what happens next," said Reconstruction Coordinator Jang Soo-jin. Approaching with a tablet full of urgent reports, Daewon turned from the massive window that looked out over the Harvester homeworld. In the distance, ships from dozens of different species were landing, bringing representatives from newly freed worlds. But their expressions weren't celebratory. They looked lost and frightened. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Worse than we expected," Soo-jin replied honestly. "The harvester economy was built entirely on slave labor. Now that the slaves are free, basic systems are collapsing across the galaxy." She showed him the reports flooding in from liberated worlds. Food production had stopped when agricultural slaves walked away from the fields. Manufacturing had ground to a halt when factory workers refused to continue their old jobs. Transportation networks had failed when the beings who maintained them no longer took orders. "The Makran mining worlds are facing starvation," Soo-jin continued. "The harvesters never taught them how to grow food. They just imported everything. The Kialari worlds have advanced technology, but they don't know how to maintain it without harvester technical support." Daewon felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "What about Earth?" "That's actually some good news," Soo-jin said, managing a small smile. "The Liberation Fleet reached Earth yesterday. Harvester settlers surrendered without a fight. They're actually relieved. Apparently, they were as trapped in the system as everyone else. The irony wasn't lost on them. The harvesters had created such an efficient slave system that even their own people had become dependent on it. When the slaves rebelled, the entire civilization had no choice but to collapse. I've been in contact with the Earth Restoration. Team Soo-jin continued. The planet is in better condition than we hoped. The harvesters preserved most of the original ecosystems. It will take years to fully restore, but it's definitely habitable. And the human colonies? That's where it gets complicated. Most humans want to return to Earth eventually, but the other species need our help. Killare are asking us to help them rebuild their manufacturing. The Makran want human agricultural experts. The Velteran are requesting assistance with their medical systems. Daewon understood the problem. Humans had been modified to be adaptable problem solvers, which made them ideal for helping other species rebuild. But they also had their own world to restore and their own culture to rediscover. "Something else," Soo-jin said carefully. "The other species are looking to us for leadership. We want humans to take charge of the reconstruction effort." Us. Because we started the rebellion. Because we figured out how to unite different species. Because we showed them that freedom was possible. Daewon walked to the window again, looking out at the diverse fleet of ships. Representatives from hundreds of species were gathering to discuss the future of the galaxy. Many of them had never governed themselves before. "What are you recommending?" he asked. "We establish a new galactic council. But this time, it's real. Every species gets equal representation. No more puppet governments or hidden masters. We create a rapid response system to prevent any future attempts at galactic slavery. That's ambitious. It has to be. The alternative is chaos. Without some kind of coordination, these species will either war with each other or fall victim to the next group that wants to exploit them. Over the following weeks, Daewon found himself at the center of the largest reconstruction effort in galactic history. The new Galactic Freedom Council established aid programs, technology sharing agreements, and defense partnerships. Humans took the lead in many areas, but always as helpers, not rulers. The restoration of Earth became a symbol of hope for all the liberated species. Human volunteers worked alongside aliens to clean the oceans, replant the forests, and rebuild the roads. Cities. It was slow work, but every small victory proved that cooperation was possible. The first group of human families returned to Earth yesterday, Sujin reported 6 months later. They're settling in the restored city of New Seoul. Do they feel? Daewon asked, overwhelmed but hopeful, recalling it coming home to a place they've never been. The galaxy was still fragile. Some worlds struggled with the transition from slavery to freedom. Others faced economic hardship as they learned to sustain themselves. But for the first time in millions of years, every species had the chance to choose their own path. We did, Sujin said as they watched the sunset over the restored Earth capital. We actually freed the galaxy. No, Daewon corrected. We gave them the chance to free themselves. Now comes the harder part, making sure it stays free. The age of the harvesters was over. The age of freedom had begun.